Running an MSP is about more than just knowing technology. You have to know how to run a business too. And if you've been in the MSP world for any amount of time, you've probably heard of Karl Palachuk. He is one of the original voices in the MSP space, helping small IT businesses build sustainable, profitable companies from starting and running his own MSP to writing some of the most well known books in the industry, such as this. Carl has shaped the way many IT business owners think about growth and operations. Today, we're going back to where it all started, his first IT job, the lessons he learned running an MSP, and why he's dedicated his career to helping others succeed in the industry. Let's dive in. Carl, welcome to the show. I feel like everyone in the MSP space knows your name.
So,
But
first
yeah,
of all, thank you very much. But I will say, I always have to remind people who introduce me. It's shocking. Like most people don't know who I am. If you think about it, right? Worldwide, there's probably 500,000 people who could be buying managed services in a month, but they've never heard of me or they never heard of it. And it is the reality that most people have no idea who I am. Only a handful of people who go to a bunch of events in IT know who I
wow, that is surprising. That is really surprising. A lot of people I talk to know who you are.
am. Literally, somebody we know was running an event maybe 3 years ago and said, "Oh, here's somebody that needs no introduction." And I literally stopped him on stage and I said, "How many of you know who I am?" And less than half of the people raised their hand. And I said, "Okay,
Wow.
may I please have an introduction?"
That was a great way to handle it for sure. So, we're going to look at your story, how you got into tech. But before we get into that, if you could go back and give yourself one piece of advice before starting your first business, what would it be?
One piece of advice. Wow. I think probably the biggest piece of advice I could give myself 35 years ago
Mm,
would be ignore all fear.
mm,
Because I feared talking to my wife at the time about quitting my job and starting a business. I feared competing in a market where that I didn't really understand. I feared raising rates, talking to clients, changing the business model. If you think about you overcome a lot of fear in your business. And guess what? It almost always turns out okay. The other thing is there's essentially no irreversible decisions. So if you get it wrong, okay, push the reset button and get it right.
That is a great way to look at it because so many people do live by fear. And it's hard not to. And it's hard to
But
just say, don't be scared.
I still have plenty of it. Don't get me wrong. And I still anguish over every little thing, but I know in my heart I shouldn't.
Mm, being able to frame it is an important way. It's really important. You've written tons of books. What's one book other than your own that every MSP should read?
Oh, that's easy. That's the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. When I first started my business, probably the luckiest thing that ever happened to me was that somebody told me to go read that book.
Yeah.
And I had already been like dyed in the wool with documentation just because of the nature of the business that I was running and maybe my very odd personality. But when I read that, I decided I'm going to read this every year until I don't need it anymore. And I read it every year for more than 5 years and then started reading it like every other year. And now I still read it every once in a while. I don't think there's a month that goes by that I don't recommend that people read that book.
I would agree with you there. That's actually how I got into consulting long before in today's. I just happened to be looking at how to start a preschool gymnastic program, and somebody had recommended that book. And when I opened the book, the whole world changed. Every business I went into seemed I had something to contribute that I had learned. And I started doing that just to be helpful. I didn't think there was a business of consulting. I hadn't really thought about that before. And then somebody hired me as a consultant because I had given some really good advice, but it was from the E-Myth Revisited that,
Right.
yeah, it was like the Matrix. It was like a Matrix opened and I could see the world differently. Yeah, it was a
So,
great.
and I will say, I occasionally I have to relearn a lesson. Then I go back. Okay, I got to go reread that chapter and or reread the book again. It's a pretty quick read, so if people haven't read it, they definitely should. But I read it a lot,
Yeah.
And these other books as well, but that's the place to start.
And having a good business library of books that you go back to regularly is so helpful because there are so many different times in your business. Every time you read a business book, it's going to change for you because you've experienced different things and you've had different issues that when you first read it, it didn't resonate with you. And then you go back and it's like, how did I miss this the first and second and third time? But your experience has changed. The things you're looking for have changed.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's one of the reasons why a lot of people say I prefer audiobooks. And I like audiobooks, especially if I'm doing something in the garden or whatever, driving. But I always listen to them 3 times because I know I'm going to miss something because I'm stuck in traffic or trying to turn a corner, or I get into the gardening more and like I realize I haven't listened to the last 3 paragraphs or whatever. So I figure if I listen to them 3 times, I get it, each message at least once.
Yeah. Yeah. I struggle with audiobooks too, because I think I'm a ponderer. So when I hear something, then my mind goes off somewhere else, and
Exactly.
then I miss the next 3 or 4 pages at
Well, the other
least.
thing is, I know a lot of people are like this because I've talked to them, but when I find a like an audiobook that I really like, I get maybe 2 chapters into it and I go, "Ah, shoot, now I gotta go buy the physical book so I can underline things and put my notes in it." And it's the same thing with the Kindle, even though you can take notes on the Kindle. I buy a book on Kindle, but if I really like it, I go buy the physical book.
Yep.
Because in an audio, people can say, okay, here's the 14 rules. And then you're on 6 and you're like, I need to have these in front of me.
I agree. I agree completely. Going back to you, how did you first get into technology, and what led you to start KP Enterprises back in 1995? Yeah.
Yes, it's an odd trip. No one, if you could look backward, no one could plot the path that got them to middle age, right? So I went to school. I have degrees in political science and I was in the PhD program at the University of Michigan. And so I was at Michigan because I loved computers. And so I started using university computers in 1983 and had bought my first Commodore 64, VIC 20, and then Commodore 64 in 82. And I'd always loved politics, which was my discipline, and I'd always loved computers. And so skip ahead, find myself in California, and I took a job. I took several jobs teaching political science, but then eventually decided I needed to take a job where I could combine politics and computers. And so I went to work for a company that took political information and put it online so that lobbyists and state agencies could track legislation as it goes through the state legislature.
Oh, wow.
And then that opened up this entire world of there are legislative tracking companies in every state in the union. And of course, there's federal and so forth and so on. And so I delved into that. And shortly after I got started there as the person who was supposed to help them with strategy and operations, the guy in charge of the tech support left. And so they just gave that to me. Right? So now I was in charge of computer operations for an HP 3000 mini, which is it's similar to the IBM 3060, right? It's a mini computer. A lot of people would call it a mainframe, but we had a reel to reel tape backup. We had a subsystem that did certain things that was on Novell. I brought in a Unix machine so that we could get email and connect it to other networks. This was before the World Wide Web was available to the public. So I had to write an essay of why we should be allowed to, as a commercial enterprise, to be connected to the internet. And so then Windows came along, and so I'm like, okay, you know what we should do is we should convert this old COBOL HP 3000 system into something modern that'll take us into the 21st century.
Mhm.
And I wrote a 300-page design document, and we hired a team of people who had retired from Microsoft, retired in their 20s from Microsoft, and they rebuilt it from the ground up on Windows. And then I went around and sold that into different states Our company was a 2-state operation, and we turned it into a 3-state operation with this new system, and then licensed it to another state, and we just started growing from there. And then I had the boss my boss quit and was replaced by the boss from hell. And I literally knew that as soon as I've got everything documented and everything perfect, so I can walk away and no one will know that I'm gone,
Mm.
then I'm going to quit. And so that began my journey to becoming an independent consultant. And I thought I would take a job helping all of these former clients to download legislative information and get the absolute most out of the data and run reports that they had never imagined before. And my
Mhm.
understanding of this was very deep. And the first job offer I got was to run the internal tech support for HP's Roseville, California plant, which
Okay.
had about 7,000 machines on 5,000 desktops.
Wow.
So I was in charge of their internal tech support, and it had absolutely nothing to do with politics. And I've never had a job that has to do with politics since then.
My major was harp. So look where we all get.
Right. So, and in terms of politics, don't ask me to explain anything that's going on in the last 10 years because I just know.
So when was the moment where you decided to go into business for yourself?
So with HP, I was an external consultant. And so they had a whole series of management that is hired hands, basically.
I see.
I had a short-term contract they wanted to renew, but in the meantime, I got lured to another company who was developing a super cool project with electronic data interchange. They hired me to solve the problem of how to move teeny tiny data packets that are built to be as small as possible over the internet securely. This was literally when the internet was just the public internet was only a couple of years old.
Mm.
And EDI packets had always been moved through telephones because a telephone line can be opened and closed and billed in 6-second increments. And so back in the day, you would move these purchase orders and advanced shipping notices and acknowledgments by opening and sending as little data as possible. And because I had just come from or recently come from a system where we had 72 inbound modems and more than each of the other states, I knew a lot about the telephony side of things. So they hired me and I actually solved that problem fairly shortly. And then they kept me on.
Okay.
And so I had this full-time gig where I was ridiculously overpaid, but I think I did some good things for them, but they were afraid to let me go. And I'm like, I'm bored to tears. And so I made a deal with the owner and I said, how about this? How about if we change my contract to 4 days a week? And you can see that I still am able to do everything that's important. And then 3 days a week and two, I will just gradually over time set a schedule and make it happen. And so he agreed to that. So he kept me around for about 4 years, but eventually he was just another client. And that I am truly blessed that I had him in my life because it allowed me to go get one client and supplement that income and then go get another one and another one and transition from having one client at a time to having multiple clients at a time. So,
It makes the risk a lot less when you have more than one client.
yeah. Yeah. And all of that was in the late 1990s. In the meantime, the dot-com bubble was growing and growing, and people were spending like crazy and
Hmm.
a lot like AI. It was a lot like AI is today.
Yeah. Is that the time of was that the moment when you knew that you were onto something big was during that time?
I knew that it was fun and it was growing and I was committed. I actually, at that point, had a lot of experience running bigger operations. And I'm like, okay, so I think I have to get bigger. And so I tried to figure out how to make it grow. And it took a lot of false starts, but
Mm.
eventually I did figure it out. I don't know that I ever felt like I was onto something big ever.
Okay.
I just, okay, we'll figure out how to make this grow and we're going to have fun doing it. And if I can have that combination, I'll be set.
Yeah. Yeah. This was before the term MSP was
Oh, yeah.
being So, looking back, once the MSP model started to take shape, did it evolve the way you expected?
It's interesting. It played some role in that evolution in that after the turn of the century. So once Windows 2000 was out and Microsoft was working on 2003, then a lot of things changed. The nature of the business changed, became, at least for small companies, much more IT centric. And it's hard to remember now, especially for people who didn't go through it. But in 1999, almost nobody had a computer or was connected to the internet.
Wow.
I mean, there was that big bubble, but it was the bubble of people saying, okay, I got this thing. What do I do with it? And the
Right.
people who were connected were almost universally accountants who became the first IT consultants because they were the only people who knew how to install software that were regularly in an office doing things. And
Oh,
yeah, so if, if you were an accountant, you could easily say it's like this much different to become an IT consultant. What Microsoft helps small businesses do is this massive wave of saying, hey, guess what everybody needs? Everybody needs a server in their office. And that was an easy sell. And because you could sell centralized security, you could put all of your data in one place, you could back it up, you could take it off site, you could restore it, but a hard drive crash, all of the things that people didn't know that they could do. Suddenly we were able to do them all. And so that period was just this massive growth of our industry. And we were literally convincing businesses to do something that they had never even imagined doing before. Like, oh, most of these business owners thought that computers filled up an entire room and cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then you come in and you say, look, for $5,000, I can hook you up. And so there were a lot of projects at the time that were between $5,000 and $25,000. Pretty much any business could go from zero to network for a reasonable amount of money. And what I did was just natural evolution from when I managed IT systems. I did monthly maintenance. I tested backups. I went in there every month and I had a checklist of all the stuff to do. And so to the evolution of the MSP model, there were tools starting to evolve. And some of them were not quite ready for prime time, but the biggies were ConnectWise and Kaseya. Yeah.
right.
Shocking. So
Yep.
if you wanted to buy a tool and have a quote unquote CRM or a PSA that was dedicated to your industry, ConnectWise was the only option.
Yeah.
And if you wanted what we today call a remote monitoring and management system, RMM, there were some others, but in
Mhm.
my opinion, the only one ready for prime time was Kaseya. And so back in 2003, 2004, those things emerged. This is no exaggeration. I talked to Eric Simpson about this. When he and I first wrote the first books on managed services, which I think was 2005, with the term managed services in the title, we did not have a name for RMM. We
Interesting.
just said, oh, you need a tool to implement all of this and make it happen. Right.
Wow.
So, that even that terminology hadn't yet come into existence.
Yeah.
And then, Arnie Bellini, to sell ConnectWise, ran around the country and told people, look, you got to pay attention to your ticketing system and you got to manage the money side of it. And we can make all that happen. Buy my product, right? He became one of the early evangelists of what we today call managed services. And so that term, again, didn't really exist at the time. And so it evolved when Eric Simpson and Amy Luby, who ran the Managed Services Professional Services Network, PSN. So don't ever complain to me about NSITSP. But I'm not the first one with the horrible acronym. But we literally just started telling people there's this business model where you can flat fee this if you do it right and you put some borders around your profitability. You can't give away everything, but you can give away a lot for a flat fee. And it's just a matter of knowing the formula. So Amy did it one way and Eric did it a different way and I did it a third way. And Eric and I, super early on, when we couldn't speak at Microsoft or couldn't speak at some other conference, we started holding our own conferences and speaking at each other's events. And that we like to say that early years, we decided to put a rubber band around our books and we sold each other's books for 5 years. And you can still buy his book on my website. So all of us are friends to this day, but we just evolved what became today the managed service business model. And some of it was clearly the genius of people like Arnie Bellini. Some of it was his competitors that said, oh, I can do that only better. And so Autotask emerges and then merges with Kaseya. And some of it was very practical. Look, you provide regular maintenance, you provide all the services, and you can predict over the course of a year what it costs to maintain 10 people, 15 people, 20 people. Why not figure out a way to make it very palatable to sell to individuals? Anyway, that's a very long-winded version of the history of managed services.
It's great. So many people don't know that anyway, but that business model is so amazing. And I see it in so many places now, but I love hearing the story behind it in the industry. And because, yeah, it's so much easier to predict from the customer's point of view what their spend is going to be. And to be able to run a business as an MSP, knowing what's going to be incoming as far as future finances. It was a huge part for the industry for sure. What was the hardest part about going from solo consultant to a business owner with a team?
There were two hard parts. The hardest part as a business was moving from one to two is a dramatic, like you will never make a bigger change in your business. And I took a few stabs at getting that right. But then it's just a matter of, okay, I have to trust that these people actually can do what I can do. And even today, I find people who've been in business 25 years and they don't believe that their team can do it as well as they can. And it holds them back. And some of them literally are at 3, 4, 5 million, but they're still being held back from doubling their revenue because they do so much of the work themselves. On the personal side, in 1999, I came down with rheumatoid arthritis, which is an immune disease that permanently changed my life and reduced my ability to work quite significantly. Even to this day, I can do about 6 hours of real work in a day, period. End of story. So I wasn't capable of doing what a lot of people I see people say, oh, I work 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And I'm like, I couldn't, if I wanted to, I couldn't possibly do that. So that was a serious challenge, but it was also a matter of, okay, so how does one grow a company without killing themselves?
Yes.
And hence the surfboards back here, which you can't really see, but they say on them, relax, focus, succeed, which is my personal philosophy that evolved from my struggles with work-life balance and trying to figure out how do I have this disease that dramatically affects me and still grow a business.
Yeah. And really, the person that's working 80 hours shouldn't be doing that either. It is so important to focus on mental health and make sure that you have that work life balance. You need to slow down because otherwise you're going to be forced to slow down. As I was definitely one that had multiple jobs and doing everything, and I thought I could do so much. And then, yeah, I was forced to stop medically. I always have to be careful of making sure I decompress at times so that I stay and am able to keep going because yeah, it eventually it really catches up to you and it will change your life if you don't get a handle on it.
No matter who you are less productive after the 10th hour, the 11th hour. I always tell people, man, I never want to have a surgeon cutting on me in the 11th hour of their shift. And in fact, I made a point of picking somebody to do my taxes that they have one of these systems where I can see when she logs in and when she's working on my stuff.
Yeah.
And I know she does it during business hours. She's never working on my taxes at 11 o'clock at night.
More. Yeah, that's important. You don't want someone tired dealing with your
Right.
money.
Right. Or your network security, right?
Yeah, and
Or your back.
morning. Oh, Carl, this is a section that we have called the MSP Growth Lightning Round. And so it's just
Oh,
some fun questions. What's the worst business advice you've ever received?
oh, I would say pretty consistently, the worst business advice I've ever received is all the attention people are asked to put on their competition. Know your competition and examine the market. And everybody talks about business plans and they spend this massive amount of energy focusing on the market and the competition and whatever. And I'm like, I got to say, after 35 years, I have never had any value from spending 1 minute looking at my competition. I started by not knowing what they charge. I just charged what I wanted and it worked out. I don't care about their bundle. I don't care how much they pay their employees. I don't care what their minimums are, how they sell blocks of time or what markup they have for their hardware. Like nothing, none of that matters. And I do an exercise sometimes and I tell people, answer all those questions I just gave you. What do you know about your competition? And they don't know anything. I'm like, okay, so stop paying attention to them. Pay attention to your own clients. Take 100% of that energy and stop looking at the competition and start looking at your own clients. And maybe we're just lucky to be in IT where it's an expanding universe and the amount of money spent on IT will be bigger last year than it was this year. And that will continue for the rest of your life. But just do not worry about the competition. They are irrelevant to your business and your success.
Yeah. And actually, getting to be friendly with your competition can be a great help as well because there
Oh,
could be
yeah.
some service that they don't offer and or they have too much happening and they can send something your way. And it makes you feel much better. I'm not a fan of having competition. I guess it feels like enemy and I don't like that feeling. So I'd much rather have everybody just be friendly and help each other out. That's my
And
best way.
I run a local IT user group in Sacramento, the
Mhm.
SMB IT professionals in Sacramento.
Yeah.
And like literally for more than 20 years, the only time I have ever gone up against any of the people in that group, and there's one time where there's somebody won a competition and Microsoft, they said, okay, how do I spend this money? They called Microsoft and Microsoft gave them the name of 3 consultants that they could talk to. And they were all members of the user group. And oh, sort of other than that, in all of this time, never gone up against any of those people. But I
Yeah.
have hired some of them to help me in larger jobs. And I have been hired by them to do specific jobs. And building those communities, I think is super, super valuable.
Yeah. I like that. If you could ban one IT buzzword forever, what would it be?
Ooh, an IT buzzword. I would say digital transformation, right? Whenever I see the word digital transformation, I'm like, okay, so this is like a buzzword generator came up with this. It doesn't actually mean anything. Back in the day, we said, we're going to take your forms and we're going to make them electronic or whatever. Okay, you can make an argument about that. But today, to tell somebody that they need to adopt advanced digital transformation, I'm like, I don't actually know what you're talking about. And I'm in the business.
I love it. That's a good one for sure. And the last question, you're known for being an educator. What's the one concept MSPs struggle with the most?
Believing me. I tell people things like, just raise your rates. You will not lose any clients. And there are people who focus forever about, oh, I lost this client. And then I go into, okay, you know, tell me about that client. They bought about $300 a year. They didn't take my advice. They never paid their bill. I'm like, okay, it seems like you're better off, right? There's so much advice where, and this is a kind of a doing coaching and consulting. Sometimes you have a perspective of this business, of this industry that is quite holistic. And when people want to argue about one little thing or one little thing or one little thing, they are missing the big system view of the world, right? The way that you hire affects your branding. The way that your technicians are trained affects your branding, your customer service with your client. Like every little thing works together. And so I don't sure that answers your question, but I just think like sometimes when I give people advice and they ignore me, I'm like, I would love to force you to take this one piece of advice and see if it works out.
Right. Absolutely. And pricing is such a big thing. I think so many MSPs undersell their services. And there's a book called Influence. I think you've read that one as well,
Oh, yeah.
where they talk about the turquoise necklaces and and somebody went into a tourist area and there were sellers selling turquoise necklaces at all different stalls. And so they were all priced the same. Randomly, they would pick, they wouldn't get, they knew nothing about turquoise necklaces. The least expensive ones maybe didn't get as much. But then somebody tripled the price of the same exact turquoise necklace and they sold out. And a lot of times when people can't figure out and understand what the actual value is because they're trying to do this on so many things, that their butter, their TVs, they're trying to become experts on so many things and you just can't. There's too many buying decisions. And so in those some of these situations, value and price are equal. So delivering the lowest price sometimes can make you look like the cheap option.
Right.
One of our products used to be, we were trying to make it really cost effective, but we were always told, "Oh, you're the cheaper one, the lesser." And it was like, we're the same we're essentially the same, we're doing the same
Right.
thing. And we thought better. And then we raised the price, and now the other same product that used to be the higher caliber one is now the cheap one. So that's completely pricing. That's
Right.
completely pricing.
I've always had this view of, okay, if you get a choice between a technician who's $100 an hour and one who's $150 an hour, wouldn't you want to bet your entire business on the one who gets $150 an hour?
Exactly.
Right. So,
Exactly. Yeah.
but yeah, the other thing is a lot of people are trying to save the client's money. In one of my books is the Absolutely Unbreakable Rules of Service Delivery. And one of the big piece of advice there is don't hit both sides of the conversation, right? Let the client decide what they want. And it is not your job to save their money. One of my favorite clients of all time, when I started my second managed service business, I went to him and we had signed a deal the first year. And then when it was time to redo that, because I wanted to move to per user pricing, he's an attorney. He's a very well paid attorney. And he said, I'm not going to read this. Just tell me why I'm signing this. Is it just because you want more money? And I go, yes, John, that's why you're signing this, is so I can make more money. And he said, okay, I'm a platinum kind of guy. So unless you tell me otherwise, I'm going to sign the platinum deal. I said, okay. Like literally that was our negotiation.
Right, right. That's great. So you followed your own advice. So I would say everyone should be listening to you. They should take your advice because
It goes back to my last thing. Everybody should take my advice.
exactly. So every business has a turning point, that moment where things start clicking, that big breakthrough moment. What was that for your business? What was that brought it to the next level?
Well, that's interesting. I think so for me it's kind of weird because around 2005 I wrote this book on documenting networks, and maybe it was a little before that, but in that book I kind of standardized the way that you document a small business network, and that introduced me to thousands of people I'd never met before who suddenly were like, "Oh, there's a way to actually do this. It's the right way." And it's super obsolete now, but at the time, there was no standard way to document a small business network. So this sort of created that. And I had local people say, I see you're doing something on the national scene, but I don't know exactly what it is. And they wanted to talk to me. And it's very odd. That helped me grow my business. And part of the turning point was being able to take that and say, but I'm not doing all the work. And so you need to know I will sell this service, but I may not be the person who shows up and does the work. And I had this new wave of clients that didn't expect me to do all the work. And that's gets way back to people getting stuck in their business, is that they never let their clients evolve to accepting the fact that other people could be competent in this industry. And part of it is a weird thing in technology where we have so much emphasis on technical prowess. Whoever knows the most and can memorize the most network information is the winner. It's okay. Clients just want their stuff to work.
Exactly.
So I think that's sort of that evolution to a new layer of clients that
Mhm.
were hired under different circumstances and didn't expect me to be the person to do all the work. That
Yeah.
allowed me to then get more and more clients under the same agreement. with them not thinking I was going to be the person to come in there and do all the work. That essentially opens the door to having as many clients as you want. Most are even 10% of the work. There is a physical limit on how many clients you can.
Absolutely. And that's such a big changing point as well, because you're selling yourself. And then the next part, that next evolution is you're selling a business, a concept,
Right.
and it's not you anymore. And that is so important because you can't sell a business that's only you.
Right.
So you're stuck with it.
And actually, that gets back to another book by Michael Gerber, E-Myth
Mm,
Mastery, where he talks about you have to build a business that's bigger than you. If
right.
your business isn't bigger than you, then it dies when you die.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. So how did Small Biz Thoughts come about? And what was your vision behind that?
So it's funny. My first book, the network documentation workbook, was only 90 pages.
Okay.
And so I called my company Great Little Book Publishing because it was a little book, right?
Love
And the
that.
idea was like, I don't know if you were involved back then, but I know you know people who were. We used to buy these books that were 600 pages, right? And it would be, okay, here's your Windows NT book. Here's your Novell book, right? Here's everything you need to know about whatever the new technology is. And they were these big, monstrous, fat books that were the same chapters. Oh, the history of technology, the history of the computer. I don't need the first 7 chapters of this book.
Yeah.
Get
Okay.
to the point. So my books are smaller. They're not 40, 50 pages, but they are 300 pages, 350 pages, but they're not 600 pages. I'm not trying to compete with Harry Potter. So anyway, so the company's called Great Little Book. And then I started a blog which was focused on small business consultants. And so I just called it Small Biz Thoughts. And it was originally was by Great Little Book Publishing. Now the corporation is Great Little Book Publishing. And the Small Biz Thoughts is a DBA for Great Little Book. But
Oh,
the corporation that owns it all is Great Little Book Publishing. I decided when I started to grow my business that I would start growing the book side of things because I had written Relax, Focus, Succeed, the network documentation workbook, managed services in a month, service agreements for SMB consultants, right? So I had all of those books. And then I had one on storage networks and network attached storage. I had 5 books and I'm trying to build that business. And that allowed me to separate in my brain, like literally split my office down the middle. And I had employees who were with the book publishing and employees who were with technology.
okay.
And so I started calling them Great Little Book and Small Biz Thoughts. And it's evolved from there. And eventually, between the two companies, I think we topped out at 17 or 18 employees. But my favorite period was when we were right around 12 to 15 employees, because
Mm,
then I could share employees back and forth between the companies. No matter what wild idea I came home with, somebody could implement it. And it was just a beautiful transition. And when I sold my first company, KP Enterprises, I went to work with the person who bought it for a few years. And when he sold it again, he started a second IT company and I called it Small Biz Thoughts because I
okay.
already had the name and I was already using it. And there was no argument about who this is. And my clients had also seen some of that name before.
That's great. So that brings us to the acronym. I'm not going to make any judgment. The NSITSP, the National Society of IT Service Providers. I think after 6 months of practicing, it just rolls off the tongue.
The other group that I grew up with this in this industry is the IAMCP, right?
Mm,
International Association of Microsoft Certified Professionals. If they can survive and not be hurt by their acronym,
right.
NSITP can as well.
I agree. I agree. So how did that come about? That's obviously where we know each other from.
Right.
But why don't you tell me the story of that and why it's so important for listeners to get involved in?
Well, for a few years, I've been struggling with the industry. It has problems, right? We have struggles, we have challenges. We've always had them, but we haven't been very self aware in the sense of, oh, here's this challenge that we can't get this kind of hardware or this kind of software, or they're changing the business model, or vendors want to do stuff that we don't want to do. Those are day to day challenges. But with cybersecurity and just explosion of ransomware, what happened is there became bad guys, which is a very nice way of saying truly evil people who were able to get rich off of our clients. And
Mm.
whether we like it or not, we are the front line from that. And then I started thinking about, okay, let's examine this industry. Like, where are we and what challenges do we have? Because we have challenges of people who are scoundrels in our industry. That's been true from day one. People who rip off clients and misrepresent what they're doing, what we used to call trunk slammers. Everybody starts somewhere, but you can act ethically and professionally, even if you're operating a very small startup operation. So we have challenges of being in an industry where a lot of people are giving us a bad reputation. And then we have the government starting to regulate us. And then we have insurance industries that say, hey, we've been selling cyber insurance to you people and your clients for a decade without doing any checks to see if you're doing any of the work. And now suddenly the insurance industry is losing money because of ransomware, and they decide to enforce their own contracts. So we should be super friendly with the insurance industry because we are helping them save money and they are helping us get the checklist we need to say, okay, if you do this, you can lower your rates. And so we had those kind of challenges. So I started thinking about all this and put together a series of meetings, public meetings, where I said, hey, I want to talk about this industry and all of our problems. And I came up with the pillars of managed services or pillars of successful IT. And it includes ethics and morals and building strong relationships and having good relationships with the government and literally starting to talk about ourselves and hold each other accountable for professional ethics and so forth. And the first meeting, just hundreds of people showed up, an open public meeting. And I was like, "Ew, this is more than I was expecting." And so we said, should we do this again? And I was just overwhelmed with people saying you should do something. And I've been thinking about what does something look like? A friend who I won't name, but very well known in this industry, said, I want to do something to create like an association to put all this together and think about like how can we influence the future of our industry as an industry, as a profession. And this person said, that's not for you to do. I'm like, okay, who's going to do it? And so I just told my web developer, and some people know. So Kara Schoenveld is our web developer, and she worked for me for many years. And I just said, I need you to pop up just a simple 5-page website. So
Yes.
it's got to be able to have memberships and track who's a member. We need a page for who we are, and I need to put up a couple of documents and a video, and right, pretty simple. Anybody could do it.
Yes.
So I give her this request, and then I go off into Nashville for the weekend for 4th of July with a friend, and the Kaseya attack happens. And I'm like, okay, that's it. Like this 5-page website is now a major undertaking and we have to just do this. And
Mm.
that weekend, I heard people on the radio between politicians and members of the media. I heard people saying things like, this is just must be really bad consultants, bad software, not properly implemented. These people don't know what they're doing. And all I could think of is, oh my God, like nobody who's talking about us has any idea
Mm.
what they're talking about. And about the same time, the state of Louisiana decided to define in the law what is a managed service provider, which, by the way, is an IT company that provides services to the state agency or government inside the state of Louisiana, what an MSP is. And so
Mm.
like, okay, a lot of people are talking about us, but we don't have a seat at the table and we
Right.
need to do that. And so I got together friends and we created a nonprofit, and the advantage of having be connected to IT consultants all over the world is we literally instantly had that and we incorporated. I got a bunch of friends to agree to be on the initial board and help us kick it off. And eventually we said, okay, If we're going to be a nonprofit, these have to be elected positions. And that's where you came into the picture.
I That's right. That's right, and we've done so much in the last 3.5 years, I
Yeah,
think. Not But we need more members. It's something you can sit on the sideline, but we're not gonna get this done if
I,
everybody just says someone else should be doing it. Everybody needs to go to nsitsp.org, become a member, get involved.
I agree.
It's a fantastic way to meet with other people. We're all quite good friends, and it just expands your network, and you're making a difference in your industry. And to be able to do that, to be able to be in an organization that is doing something that no one else is doing. So make sure you do
Right.
become a member.
Well, and another perspective that I don't think anybody's talked about is we have big association claims to have 2,000 members. And we have smaller associations that say, oh, we got 1,500, we got 1,000, we got 1,100. But almost all of the groups in this industry are 40, 50, 60 people, and there's dozens of them. And there are literally 500,000 companies that should be a member of a professional association for IT consultants. And even the companies, the organizations that are 20, 30, 40 years old have less than 2,000 members.
Wow.
I think there's a resistance in this industry to joining and to really committing to an association that will professionalize us and set standards. Some people just look, I'm doing fine. I got all the money I need and my business is growing and I don't have to be part of that. But
Right.
it's at some point, it has to happen.
And
Right? NSITSP is what gets us there.
Yeah, and change is going to happen. Change will happen. Things don't stay the same. So, if it's either us working and making changes or the government and insurance companies are going to force companies to make
Right.
changes.
Yeah.
Might as
And
well have a voice in it.
yeah, as we say in the National Society, is either you can let the change happen to you or you can be involved in the conversation as it evolves because, it's going to happen. You
Yeah.
can participate or be subject to whatever else somebody else comes up with.
Carl, as we close up today, what does success mean to you today?
Today,
Yeah.
I love the question because part of my relaxed, focused, succeed philosophy is you get to decide what success means to you. For me, for a long time, my goal has been to help IT consultants to be as successful as possible. And so for me, success is seeing people growing their businesses to the point where they can actually either sell it or retire comfortably and to make some money doing that. Obviously, I got to live too.
Right?
But
And
I've always been a big fan of enjoying what I do. So for me, I enjoy helping people. And for whatever, 30-ish years, my daughter was the absolute center of my universe. But at some point, it's okay. She's done. She doesn't need me anymore. And my center needs to be helping this industry to be as professional and successful as possible.
that's
I know
great.
that's not according to some people, but literally what I do every day.
I know you and I know that is true. So I don't think it sounds corny at all. And that's a wrap on today's episode of the MSP Growth Podcast. If Carl's story inspired you, let us know by hitting subscribe, leave a review, or connect with us online. If you're looking for help for your business, do consider our growth program and it goes into consulting. As Carl said, having a definition of success is so important, and having your business surround around values, it's critical in growing and getting to that next step. So do reach out to us if you're looking for more assistance. So until next time, keep growing, keep learning, and remember, every challenge is just another chapter in your success story. See you next time.
Thanks for having me.